we're going to talk about uh, recoring the deck on a Balboa 26. Big picture. Here's what we saw when we opened up the deck. A lot of rotted wood here. And you can see this section we've already cleaned out. This section is completely wet and rotten. They used particle board to core the decks on these Balboa boats, which is a super bad idea because the water just spreads, unlike marine plywood or balsa core. So anyways, all this had to be removed. The way you find the damage is by using a hammer. It's called sounding, and you tap on the top of the deck, and you'll notice a distinct difference in sound between areas that are rotten and areas that aren't. Back to it. Let's take a look at some of the things we did. This is some of the theory. On the left here in the brown is good sound wood, and on the right is sound wood. This is the side of the boat here. Here's the inside, and here's the outside. What we're going to do is we're going to remove a section of the deck here, the top part of the deck, and then we're going to core out all the rotten stuff, and we're going to actually trim out the material back about 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch from the edge of the top of the deck in. And the idea is that the replacement parts, which is we use marine plywood, they're going to key in. They're going to go in and under the deck to kind of get wedged in there, and that's going to provide a lot of structural strength, so that this joint right here where you put the thing is, if you cut it right here, if that would be the only part that's holding everything together, here you have some of the original epoxy layers that are holding things together. So because you're keying it in, there's no way to fit it straight down, so you have to make multiple pieces. So I used 1, 2, 3 pieces of marine plywood to basically fill the gap between the 2 parts of good wood and the 2 parts of bad wood. Okay, so let's go through some of the photographs. Here's first removing it. We cut the line with a fine multimeter multi-tool. It's a vibrating saw blade. It's very, very thin. It leaves a very clean line. It's very easy to use. Totally recommend that. Dremel makes a great version. So does I think it's DeWalt and a Porter Cable. There's a variety of them on the market. This stuff, when it comes out, the particle board turns into just like flakes. It's like coffee grounds. And here's some pictures of it completely removed and dried out. You see here I made an accidental cut line that was too close. So you got to make sure you make a good cut line. Make sure you're removing the area that you need to. Here, as I showed before, this is the another top section. The forward section is completely wet and completely rotten. We took all that out. These are the tools we use. The scraper is important. This wheel is important. This is a really good tool. And there you see it's all removed and cleaned up. I'm going to zoom in this photo in particular. Right here you see there's these little like fiberglass tabs that stick up every once in a while. I think it was during the manufacturing there were cuts or gaps in the particle board, and those got filled with epoxy. Anyways, you got to chisel those down and flatten them out because you're going to put flat wood in as a replacement. Going back to full size and then to the next pictures, you can see more of see, it's not an even line or anything, but that's okay because we're only doing a little pencil line width, and the top piece will go right back down. These are some of the other tools we used. Chisel, gooseneck chisel here, a little wood chisel there. This is an extremely important tool, a must-have for this job. This is a 2-fluted carbide tip router bit. This is actually a biscuit bit. It's called a biscuit bit. And I put it in a hand drill and just held it by hand, and I used that to cut the material out underneath the lip of the deck. And you can see we used blue tape along the deck lines. Here we're fitting the plywood in. You can see we're putting I'm going to zoom in on this a little bit. We're putting pieces of plywood in. They have to fit underneath this lip, and you see the different colors. That's where I had to sand the plywood down to make it a little bit thinner as it fit under. So all this had to be custom fit, and all the pieces are marked to make sure that they go where they're supposed to go when they get shoved back in there. And then in this side I only used 2 pieces. On the other side I learned and I made a 3rd piece because it's kind of hard to keep this gap from being too big. This is a little bit too big in my mind. Okay, and then let's go to full size on this one. This is the underside of the top of the deck, and that has to be all cleaned off, sanded flush, and make a nice clean surface. And of course, this whole, once you get the wood in there and you fit the top deck, you need to basically, you're gonna fit everything perfectly, and you're gonna fill all that up with epoxy. And I used epoxy and I mixed in colloidal silica to make it a little bit thicker, but I mixed it to kind of the consistency of maybe like mustard. It was a little liquidy, so it could run in some of these gaps, and but it wasn't completely liquid. You don't want to find a hole somewhere and just run out all over the interior of your boat. Some more pictures. Once we put the top piece on, we put these cawls, which we made in advance, and they're all numbered to fit them in order. See, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So they fit because each one is a different width, because the deck is different width. So these cawls all the way along the deck, and then we put a very big heavy box on top of all the cawls. We used a box full of stone tile, I guess it was, to hold everything down. You'll see pictures of that in a second. And here it is, all glued up. And as we get some close-ups here, you can see this is where the epoxy has cured. It kind of oozed out in some areas because we had a little bit too much epoxy, and that's okay. You just take a chisel and pop it off, and then pull that blue tape off, and you end up with a real nice clean line. And then we're going to cover that whole thing with Kiwi Grip. It's a top coating. It's kind of like yogurt, and they have a special roller, and you put the Kiwi Grip on, and it covers all these seams. You see real nice clean seams. Here we are redoing the portions of the deck where the stanchions mount and where there's hardware. Those have to be over drilled, filled with epoxy, and then you drill a small hole in the middle for the actual hardware to go through, and that protects the plywood from any future water damage should your caulking ever leak. Okay, and I guess there's a little touch-up spots where I thought there were gaps, and I filled those with epoxy. Okay, and then here's kind of an express version. On the second side, we got a little bit smarter. Here you see we had sound wood here and rotted wood here, and we removed everything. This, why remove sound wood? So we basically decided, we went out as far as we could till it was no longer very sounded, pretty rotten, and we basically removed all the rotten wood, and we kept this piece of sound wood. We just basically poured liquid epoxy over it to seal it, and on the other side here I did the same thing with the puzzle pieces, the new plywood, marine plywood. I coated them with epoxy. I thought that was a smart idea afterwards. And then you see also, as I zoom in, you see on this side I used 3 pieces. So I was able to wedge the plywood underneath the lips and then fill that center gap with a third piece of plywood that tightened everything up nice. This is kind of what you're looking for. This is perfect. Real nice tight gaps. Not a lot of room for the epoxy. It's underneath the lip. That's the ideal goal. As you see, I didn't do it perfectly here, and then I started using a centerpiece. And then again, they're all labeled, and so you have to know which one goes where and everything. There's a close-up of the epoxied materials prior to putting things in. And then I did another thing on the back side of the top of the deck. I put in a dab of epoxy and let those cure. Then I use those. You can sand them down and use it to level the top piece so that as you put it on top of the plywood, it's perfectly level with the rest of the deck. That was kind of a key idea. That worked out really well. And then we put on the tape. You see I put wax paper down over the tape to protect my cawls. I put my cawls down, I put a couple boards, and I put these huge boxes of rocks on top and let it cure overnight. Okay? And then here's, you see we over drilled, we filled with epoxy, and then we marked where we're going to drill for the actual hardware. You see for this side stays. And we did the same thing with all the stanchions. Here you see I'm leveling the deck. The deck was a little proud here, so I had to kind of sand it down and make it nice and level. And don't worry about what it looks like. All that stuff is going to be replaced, covered over with the Kiwi Grip. Here we are putting the stanchions on. Lots of good polyurethane caulk protecting it in the future. You see what that looks like on both sides. And then we put this Kiwi Grip on. Now this stuff basically, you have to, I'm going to zoom way in here. You have to really, really tape off all the areas that you don't want Kiwi Grip on. And you see here where I taped this area off because that's still, the deck looked good there, and I kept it away from the caulk. And and I taped this area here. But in the middle, in the field, that's where you roll on the Kiwi grip and let it dry. And then that's a non-stick coating, non-slip coating for your deck. It makes it look good. I used white. I think it came out great. And it's lasted for 4 or 5 years now. It looks awesome. There's a close-up. You can see where we taped around this hardware. Then this is that picture again, kind of showing the graphic of how we did all this. I hope that helps. Okay, folks, thanks very much.